I wanted to talk to you about the paradox of wealth. And this is a complicated issue. Let's see if I can put it in simple terms, because I think it's very important. I think it's very important from an economic perspective and an ecological perspective. In classical economics, in the work of Lord Lauderdale, who was one of the classical economists in the days of Adam Smith, in the work of David Ricardo, and in the work of Karl Marx, in classical economics, and these thinkers especially, in classical political economy, they made a distinction between wealth and value, or between use value and exchange value. They said wealth consisted of everything in the world that was useful to human beings, that they thought of wealth in terms of use values. So anything that was useful, whether it was abundant or scarce, constituted, and anything that in that sense had some kind of intrinsic value, was part of the wealth of the world. The wealth was the sum of use values. But as Lauderdale put it, private riches demanded scarcity. Private riches were based on exchange value. That is, in terms of monetary value, the profits and so on, that you could get from them. So to have exchange value, something had to be scarce. Water was abundant, so it had no exchange value. And he said private riches had to have scarcity. Exchange value had to have scarcity. So he made a distinction between, Lauderdale made a distinction, this is called the Lauderdale paradox, between public wealth and private riches. And he said we live in a system where private riches can expand by destroying public wealth. That is, he argued that if we somehow destroy our water supply, or our water supply gets scarce, and then and maybe it's polluted and we put an exchange value on it, he used this example, then because of its scarcity, then people have become rich essentially by destroying public wealth, destroying parts of nature, destroying parts of use value. The same with air, and the same with food. If we're growing crops and we decide that we can't sell all the crops, even though people are hungry, and we burn some of them in order to increase the exchange value, then we've expanded private riches by destroying public wealth. And this created a big controversy in classical economics, and some of them, like Jean-Baptiste Say and John Stuart Mill and others, threw out the notion of wealth based on use values. They say, well, in economics we're not going to talk about use values or wealth in that sense anymore. We're only going to talk about exchange value. So wealth will be value and value only. So we will say the expansion of private riches is the same thing as the expansion of wealth. The expansion of value is the same thing as the expansion of wealth. And this was then adopted by neoclassical economists. Carl Menger, who came along in 1871, said, oh, this is a good thing. He says that Lauderdale paradox is actually a good thing, because it shows us how we can create scarcity and then promote exchange value and private riches. He actually said that what we should do is find ways to destroy water. And he said maybe we can figure out how to bottle mineral water, sell mineral water to people, if we can make it scarce enough. And so they saw this as a way, he called it increasing wealth, but it's really increasing private riches. You're really decreasing wealth because you're taking away from people, from nature, something that existed before. And there's a whole problem in the way we understand wealth. you have to understand that private riches are not the same as public wealth. If all the mortgages, if like all the mortgage debt was lost in the country, of course it has all repercussions on the economic system, but what you have to understand, if a debt is canceled, then somebody gains as well as somebody losing. And the mortgages do not increase the wealth of the country and the speculation based on the mortgages. You could cancel the mortgages and people would actually be better off if you could find a way to reduce the mortgages in the country. If you could find a way to conserve water and conserve air instead of finding ways to essentially profit on it. And this whole kind of reduction of wealth to value, of use value to exchange value, of seeing only in terms of exchange value, monetary value, profits, and forgetting about the natural bases of wealth, public wealth, has created these absurd notions in economists who we put in charge of things like directing our policy on climate change. So, for example, Wilfred Beckerman, well, I'll start with William Nordhaus, who's the most famous, the leading climate economist in the United States, said in 1997, I believe, or was it 1993? Anyway, said in the 1990s in the Journal of Economic Perspectives, it was in 1993 that he said if we had a failure of agriculture, agriculture is only part of GNP, and it's only 3% of GNP. So if he says if we had a failure of agriculture, a big drop in agriculture because of climate change, it wouldn't have very much effect on the economy. Wilfred Beckerman came along, and a leading economist in England concerned with environmental issues. He says, yeah, agriculture is only 3% of the US economy. If agriculture in the United States dropped by 50%, we'd only lose like 1.5% of GNP. It would be minuscule. So a drop in 50% in food production would have no effect. So if climate change hurts agriculture, so what? Thomas Schelling, who got the Nobel Prize in economics, actually these guys all said this in 1997. I've checked my notes here. And he said the same thing. He said it's we'd only lose 1 or 2% of GDP if agriculture dropped by half. What's wrong with this? Well, of course, if you have a drop of food by half, then the price of food would go up, wouldn't it? And you would have food shortages all over the world. Of course, look at it now. We've got the greatest food crisis that maybe we've ever known, and it's related to increase in prices of foods. These economists think only in terms of exchange value. They have no idea that human beings eat food, that the economy depends on food, that people will eat before they buy cell phones, the whole world system, our civilization would be in trouble if this were to happen. On the basis of this kind of logic, Nordhaus said in 1993, this was the Journal of Economic Perspectives article, and he's considered to be the leading economist on climate change in the United States. He said that we should pack up our tools because economists have discovered that climate change really doesn't make that much difference. It wouldn't have that much of effect on the economy. It's a secondary issue. He said we should focus on more pressing issues. And he got in a debate in Science magazine. He said, this is only we look out at 100 years and it's only going to cause GDP to drop by 1 or 2%. And the natural scientists said, yeah, but we would all be dead, right? The natural scientists would say, yeah, but in the economy, they're saying the economy would only lose 1 or 2%, but the natural scientists would say that most species on Earth would be gone. Human civilization would have collapsed, and so on. Now, how could you have such disparity? It's because we have a situation where most of what is really the wealth in the world, the material basis of our existence, is not accounted for in the system, and it never will be accounted for in this system. The system actually builds on, it tries to profit on scarcity. It treats nature as a free good, and it has no roots in ecology, thermodynamics, or any other more fundamental understanding of physical existence. It has no, our economists are ignorant of biology, they're ignorant of human welfare.